We both love Pope Francis, but even Pope Francis still needs to learn a lot about. He doesn't accept the recognition of couples, and that really, I think he needs to be educated about that. But the steps he's taking are good first steps.
It is being called the Francis effect. Changes in the Catholic Church being pushed through what is often a lot of disagreement. You just heard it. Pope Francis making waves the size of tsunamis, seeking to bring the church into the 21st century. Wednesday in Vatican City, it was the first time an American Catholic gay rights group was given VIP treatment during an audience with His Holiness. And every time something like this happens, the inevitable question from followers is, what's next? Let's welcome to MidPoint. He's been reporting on the Vatican as a correspondent, starting with Vatican Radio in 2002, and is now the Newsmax Vatican correspondent. Edward Pentin joins us on the show. Ed, good to talk to you again.
Good to be with you, Ed. Hi.
Is it fair to say that what we just heard coming into the segment is how a lot of people, first of all, think of the Pope immediately anymore? A lot of old-time Catholics are saying, gee, we love the man. He's wonderful for us, but, gee, he's got to learn a few things about how we do business here.
Yes, it's a very interesting comment, that, because the debate has been the Francis effect. How much is it really getting those outside the church or those who've left the church back into the church? I mean, that's essentially what the Pope wants, to bring people back into the church. And is it actually bringing them in, or is it just affirming them in their lifestyle or their view of life? And the jury's still out on that, because as you heard from that commenter, his view of the Pope is that he should really change to have the same vision that he has. But that's not really how the Pope sees it. The Pope wants to, his emphasis really is to show the loving mercy and unconditional love of God to everybody, in the hope that they will come back and that their lifestyles will change and that they'll turn away from what the Church considers to be sinful behavior. But as I say, it's not clear yet just what effect the real Francis effect is having.
Ed, do us a favor and explain a little bit about the chain of command here, because I don't think, and certainly I've not heard an awful lot about this, but the Pope wants to come out and he wants to make a statement such as this. He knows it is controversial. It's looked at, I would guess, by a lot of different advisors who check what the pontiff has to say. They make sure that it's proper. Does the Pope basically at the end of the day say, that's it, I'm saying it, I don't care what you want? Or does he still have to bend a little bit to those on the side who would say, Your Holiness, I think we need to do it a different way?
Well, I think that there are different levels of what's called the magisterium, which is the kind of the teachings of the Pope, and obviously those which are most formal, like an encyclical. All of that has to go through lots of chains of command and lots of checking, and through the doctrine of the faith, the congregation of the doctrine of the faith, they have to check it that it's consistent with church doctrine and so forth. But lower down the ranking, as it were, when he's talking off the cuff, when he's talking just generally in a sort of papal interview on a plane, for example, or something like that, that's less obviously less controlled, and so he's free to speak more freely, and he does, and he says precisely what he wants to say without any controls. So, but the teaching weight of those comments is less than, say, an encyclical or a decree of some sort.
Is he under any sort of an umbrella, if you will, of people who, when he says something like this, will say, Your Holiness, I think you might want to walk this back a little bit. This isn't exactly what the Church is teaching. This will confuse a lot of people around the world, so maybe you went a little too far. Does anybody dare say that to the Pope?
I think they do. Those in his inner circle will do that. I've heard that they do say it. But the Pope, of course, is free to say really whatever he wants. But there was an example last month when he came back from the Philippines, and he said, the comment about rabbits, and the Catholics don't need to be like rabbits with regard to children, and that was largely misconstrued. But he actually sort of went back on that in an address a few days later, just to make sure that what he said was properly interpreted and not taken out of context, which is what it was. So there he did seem to listen to his advisors, and he did sort of backtrack a bit on that. But as he's the Pope, and he has really freedom to do whatever, or to say whatever he wants in many ways.
Let me get to this point here, because this is an American Catholic gay rights group. They're called New Ways Ministry. They minister to homosexual Catholics. They promote gay rights in the church. They did get recognized. They had an audience with the Pope. Ed, are there people in the Catholic faith right now, certainly part of the Pope's hierarchy and others, who are afraid, just really scared, that this Pope is going to pave the way for a greater recognition of homosexuals, that despite the fact they say that it's not what the overall canon of the church teaches, that he is the one who is going to one day change, and he's going to make homosexuals accepted in the church, by and large, no questions asked?
There is certainly concern, Ed, about this. But the church's, the Pope's view is, and it seems to be the case, that his view is that there won't be any change in church teaching. But his approach is it's very much a Jesuitical approach.
But doesn't that kind of fly in the face of church teaching then, if the gentleman who leads your church is basically saying something else in opposition to what the teaching says? That sends a mixed message, doesn't it?
It does. Well, his argument would be that he's not sending a mixed message. He is being faithful to the church's teaching, but he's going about it in a different way. But that different way makes a lot of people concerned, because they think that different method, that different approach is actually undermining the church's teaching, and it's being used by opponents of the church to essentially weaken the church's teaching and bring in, make acceptable all of these issues like gay rights and other issues too, like cohabitation. So that's the issue at the centre here, is really the approach to these issues, and whether or not the Pope is actually being co-opted and used by these groups, especially these lobby groups, to further their own ends.
To the people, I've got about 30 seconds left here, but in America there certainly is a denial, and they do not want the gay rights issue in the church. Many people don't want it involved. How do the European Catholics feel about it? Are they as vehement against it as Americans are?
Certainly some are, Ed, yes, that's certainly true. And there's certainly some pockets of traditional Catholics who are very concerned about this and think that the Pope is going way off. And really, in fact, they suspect him of actually supporting this. But as I say, the jury's still out on this. And this big synod in October, when these issues will be discussed more fully, will give a lot more insight into just where the Pope stands on this and where it's going to go forward.
And as we noted, the question is always, what's next? So we'll wait and see what happens with this pontiff. Edward Pentin, always a pleasure to have you on the show, my friend. Thanks so much for taking time to join us.
You're welcome. Thanks, Ed.
All right, take care. And we will, of course, watch as the Pope goes through his day and see what indeed is said next. Another company dares to challenge the mighty Google. Bulls, Bears, and Bucks are next right here on MidPoint.